This week in Apple news is all about what's next, what just got fixed, and what Apple might be quietly changing behind the scenes as we move closer to the next big product cycle. If you've been searching for the latest iPhone 18 Pro specs leak, wondering whether the iPhone 17 battery and charging problem is finally solved, or trying to understand where Apple Vision and smart glasses are headed, you're in the right place because there's a lot happening at once, and it all connects. Let's start with the headline that will matter to almost everyone, the iPhone 18 Pro camera. Multiple reports are pointing toward Apple adding a variable aperture lens to the iPhone 18 Pro, and if that sounds technical, here's why it matters in real life. A variable aperture means the camera can physically adjust how much light it lets in, instead of relying only on software tricks. That can translate to cleaner low-light photos, more natural background blur, better control over depth of field, and images that look less processed when you zoom in and actually examine the details. Mobile photography has reached a point where tiny gains are harder to achieve. So when a rumor points to real optical changes, not just a new filter, not just a new computational mode, it's worth paying attention. A variable aperture iPhone could also help Apple reduce some of the trade-offs we've all seen. Shots that look great on the phone screen but fall apart when you crop. Portrait photos that sometimes blur the wrong edge. Or low-light scenes that get overly bright and lose their mood. If Apple brings variable aperture to the iPhone 18 Pro, it's not just a checkbox feature, it's a foundational camera upgrade that could change how consistent iPhone photos look across different lighting conditions. But there's a catch, and it's a big one: cost. The supply chain chatter suggests this new lens technology could be significantly more expensive than what's used in the iPhone 17 Pro generation. Reports mention around a 50% increase in lens cost compared to the prior Pro model. Now, that doesn't automatically mean the iPhone 18 Pro price will jump by 50%. Phones aren't priced by one part, but it does matter because Apple is balancing multiple pressures at the same time: memory pricing, RAM costs, advanced camera components, and the overall expense of building premium devices at scale. What this really signals is Apple's likely positioning. If the iPhone 18 Pro camera system becomes the defining feature, especially with a variable aperture lens, Apple can justify keeping the Pro line firmly in the premium category. And that could mean less flexibility on price than buyers would like. Even if Apple doesn't raise the sticker price dramatically, it could adjust storage tiers, reduce discounts, or encourage upgrades through trade-in strategies. However it happens, the message is clear: the iPhone 18 Pro camera could be a genuine leap. And genuine leaps often come with premium economics. Now let's talk about the iPhone 17. Because not every story this week is about the future. One of the most practical updates is about fixing a real problem today. Apple has released iOS 26.5.1, and this update is extremely targeted. According to Apple's own release notes, it addresses an issue that affected a small number of users where wired charging may fail on certain iPhone 17 models when the battery is nearly drained. And if you've ever experienced this kind of bug, you know how stressful it is. Your phone hits a critically low battery level, you plug it in, and nothing happens. No charging icon, no recovery, just that sinking feeling that your device is stuck at the worst possible moment. What makes this iOS 26.5.1 update notable is that it isn't a broad bug fixes and performance improvements release aimed at everyone. It specifically mentions iPhone Air and iPhone 17 models, and the focus on when the battery is nearly drained tells you Apple identified a precise failure scenario. If you're searching for iPhone 17 not charging when battery dead, iPhone 17 wired charging issue, or iOS 26.5.1 charging fix, this is the update you want to know about. It also suggests the problem is limited enough that Apple didn't need to roll a wider patch for other devices, which usually means it's either hardware generation specific or related to power management changes introduced with the iPhone 17 family. Either way, if you use an iPhone 17, iPhone 17e, iPhone 17 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max, or iPhone Air, updating to iOS 26.5.1 is one of those rare times where an update is less about new features and more about restoring basic reliability from fixing today's phones. Let's shift to something that's more about Apple's story, literally. There's a new podcast plan gaining traction, built around chronicling Apple's history in a deeper, dedicated way. The idea is to move beyond quick timelines and highlight reels and instead dig into the context, the internal debates, the product philosophy, the design decisions, and the moments that shaped Apple into the company it is now. What makes this especially interesting is that it's being driven by people who have covered Apple for years, meaning there's both lived experience and the intent to do research on the eras that predate modern Apple commentary. If you're the kind of person who likes to understand why Apple became obsessed with simplicity, why certain product lines survived and others died, how marketing and industrial design evolved from one decade to the next, or how Apple's biggest wins were often preceded by near misses, this kind of long-form storytelling can be surprisingly valuable, especially in a time when Apple news cycles are dominated by leaks, launch dates, and quick reactions. And speaking of the business side of Apple, one of the most underappreciated stories this week is about laptops and pricing, specifically the MacBook Neo. While much of the broader PC market is dealing with rising average prices and fluctuating consumer demand, reporting suggests the MacBook Neo is applying competitive pressure in a way that helps keep lower-cost notebook options from disappearing entirely. This matters because laptop pricing has been drifting upward for a while, and even when specs improve, more base memory, better storage, faster chips, prices don't always come back down. The industry trend points toward average selling prices continuing to rise, and that means good value becomes less about finding a cheap device and more about finding the device that gives you the most longevity for what you pay. If Apple can keep the MacBook Neo positioned as a practical entry point, something that feels modern, performs well, and lasts long enough to justify the investment, it becomes a key product for students, first-time Mac buyers, and anyone who wants macOS without stepping into MacBook Pro pricing. In a market where affordability is shrinking, the MacBook Neo's role becomes more strategic than it looks at first glance. Now let's get into the most forward-looking and arguably most controversial part of this week: Apple Vision and the next phase of Apple's wearable strategy. Reports suggest incoming CEO John Ternus, who is expected to officially take over in early September, may already be influencing long-term decisions in Cupertino. And one of the biggest shifts being discussed is a change in direction around Apple Vision hardware. The headline idea is that Apple may be pulling back from the Vision Pro line, not because spatial computing is dead, but because Apple may be prioritizing something with broader mass market potential: smart glasses. This is the key distinction. Headsets are powerful, but they're still niche for most consumers due to price, comfort, social friction, and daily practicality. Smart glasses, if executed well, can be lighter, more wearable, and easier to integrate into daily life. There are essentially two tracks people are watching. One is display-equipped R or XR smart glasses using optical waveguides, the kind of product that overlays digital information in your field of view. That's the full AR dream, and it's also incredibly hard to build at scale with the right brightness, battery life, comfort, and cost. That's why timelines for this category often slip, and reporting suggests this may be pushed out further, potentially toward 2009. The second track is display-less AI smart glasses, more like the category popularized by products that focus on camera, audio, and voice glasses that don't necessarily project a screen but can still do a lot through on-device intelligence and cloud-based AI. If Apple goes this way, the timeline is sooner, with expectations floating around 2027 for this type of product. If that shift is real, it would be a classic Apple move: aim for the version of the future that can reach more people first, then build toward the more advanced version over time. It also aligns with where consumer tech is going right now: AI-first experiences that fit into your life without demanding you redesign your life around them. If you're searching Apple Smart Glasses 2027, Apple AR Glasses 2029, or John Ternus Apple Vision Strategy, this is the story to watch, because it hints at what Apple thinks its next platform could be after the iPhone era gradually matures, while Apple's future platforms evolve. Apple is also reinforcing something that keeps the ecosystem strong today: developers. Apple is reportedly bringing its first European Developer Center to Berlin, which is a big deal not just symbolically, but practically. Developer centers aren't just offices. They're places where teams can attend sessions, get consultations, participate in labs, and improve real products with direct guidance. For European developers, having an Apple Developer Center on the continent reduces barriers. It makes it easier for small teams and growing companies to access training and support across iOS, iPadOS, macOS, watchOS, tvOS, and Visionos. And from Apple's perspective, this is strategic. Better developer support leads to better apps, better performance, better design, and ultimately a stronger reason for users to stay within Apple's ecosystem. Finally, as attention turns toward WWDC, Apple has announced its latest Apple Design Awards winners. These awards are always worth scanning because they highlight what Apple wants the App Store to represent at its best: innovation, craftsmanship, inclusivity, interaction quality, social impact, and visual excellence. Even if you're not a developer, the Design Awards list is basically a curated collection of apps and games that feel premium apps that are often more polished, more accessible, and more thoughtfully designed than the average download. And there's a bigger signal here too. As Apple prepares for WWDC, showcasing great apps reinforces the idea that Apple's platforms are defined not just by hardware specs, but by experience, how software feels, how it performs, how it respects user privacy, and how it fits into daily life. So when you tie the week together, the theme is clear. Apple is pushing forward on premium hardware like the iPhone 18 Pro camera upgrade with a variable aperture lens, while also cleaning up critical real-world issues with targeted updates like iOS 26.5.1 for iPhone 17 wired charging. At the same time, Apple's broader ecosystem story is expanding. Developers are getting more support in Europe with a Berlin center. Design excellence is being spotlighted.